Chapter 2. The author's intention in this work. Now of all human pursuits, that of wisdom is the most perfect, the most sublime, the most profitable, and the most delightful. It is the most perfect, since a man already shares in true happiness in proportion as he devotes himself to the pursuit of wisdom. Thus the wise man says, Blessed is the man who meditates on wisdom, Sirach 14:20. It is the most sublime, because by it man especially approaches to a likeness to God, who made all things in wisdom, Psalm 104, 103, 24. Thus, since likeness is the cause of love, the pursuit of wisdom especially unites man to God by friendship. Hence it is said that wisdom is an unfailing treasure for men. Those who use it obtain friendship with God, Wisdom 7:14. It is the most profitable, because by wisdom itself man is brought to the kingdom of immortality, for the desire of wisdom leads to the everlasting kingdom, Wisdom 6:21. And it is the most delightful, because companionship with her has no bitterness, and life with her has no pain, but gladness and joy, Wisdom 8:16. Therefore, assuming the office of the wise man with confidence from God's loving kindness, although it surpasses our own powers, the purpose we have in view is, in our own weak way, to declare the truth which the Catholic faith professes, while weeding out contrary errors. For in the words of Hilary, I acknowledge that I owe my life's chief occupation to him, so that every word and every thought of mine may speak of him. But it is difficult to refute the errors of each individual for two reasons. First, because we do not know the sacrilegious assertions of each erring individual well enough to refute their errors with arguments from what they say, for the doctors of old used this method to confute the errors of the heathens, whose opinions they were able to know, since they had been heathens themselves, or at least had lived among heathens and were conversant with their teachings. Second, because some of them, like the Mohammedans and pagans, do not agree with us as to the authority of any scripture by which they may be convinced, in the same way as we are able to dispute with the Jews by means of the Old Testament, and with heretics by means of the New. But the former accept neither. Thus we need to have recourse to natural reason, to which all are compelled to assent, and yet this is deficient in things of God. But while we are occupied in the inquiry about a particular truth, we shall know what errors are excluded thereby, and how demonstrable truth is in agreement with the faith of the Christian religion. Faith and Reason, Chapter 3. In what way it is possible to make known the divine truth. Since, however, not every truth should be made known in the same way, and it is the part of an educated man to seek for conviction in each subject only so far as the nature of the subject allows, as the philosopher most rightly observes, as quoted by Boethius, it is necessary to show first of all in what way it is possible to make known the aforesaid truth. Now in those things which we hold about God, there is truth in two ways. For certain things that are true about God wholly surpass the capability of human reason. For instance, that God is three in one, but there are certain things to which even natural reason can attain. For instance, that God is one, and others like these, which even the philosophers, being guided by the light of natural reason, proves demonstratively about God. That certain divine truths wholly surpass the capability of human reason is most clearly evident, for since the principle of all the knowledge which the reason acquires about a thing is the understanding of that thing's essence, because according to the philosopher's teaching, the principle of a demonstration is what a thing is, it follows that our knowledge about a thing will be in proportion to our understanding of its essence. Therefore, if the human intellect comprehends the essence of a particular thing, such as a stone or a triangle, no truth about that thing will surpass the capability of human reason. But this does not happen to us in relation to God, because the human intellect is incapable by its natural power of attaining to the comprehension of his essence. For our intellect's knowledge, according to the mode of the present life, originates from the senses, and thus things which are not objects of sense cannot be comprehended by the human intellect except in so far as knowledge of them is gathered from sensibles. Now sensibles cannot lead our intellect to see in them what God is, because they are effects unequal to the power of their cause. And yet our intellect is led by sensibles to the divine knowledge, so as to know about God that he is, and other such truths which need to be ascribed to the first principle. Accordingly, some divine truths are attainable by human reason, while others altogether surpass the power of human reason. Again, the same is easy to see from the degree of intellects. For if one of two men perceive a thing with his intellect with greater subtlety, the two whose intellect is of a higher degree understands many things which the other is altogether unable to grasp, as instanced in a yokel who is utterly incapable of grasping the subtleties of philosophy. Now the angelic intellect surpasses the human intellect more than the intellect of the cleverest philosopher surpasses that of the most ignorant idiot, because this distance is contained within the limit of the human species, which the angelic intellect surpasses. For an angel knows God through a more excellent effect than does man, as much as the angel's essence, through which he is led to know God by natural knowledge, is more excellent than sensible things, even than the soul itself, by which the human intellect mounts to the knowledge of God, and the divine intellect surpasses the angelic intellect much more than the angelic surpasses the human. For the divine intellect by its capacity equals the divine essence. Hence God perfectly understands of himself what he is, and he knows all things that can be understood about him. But the angel does not know what God is by his natural knowledge, because the angel's essence by which he is led to the knowledge of God is in effect unequal to the power of its cause. Consequently, an angel is unable to grasp by his natural knowledge all that God understands about himself, neither is human reason capable of grasping all that an angel understands by his natural power. Accordingly, just as a man would show himself to be a most insane fool if he declared the assertions of a philosopher to be false because he was unable to understand them, much more so would be exceedingly foolish if he were to suspect a falsehood the things revealed by God through the ministry of his angels, because they cannot be the object of reason's investigations. Furthermore, the same is made abundantly clear by the definition by the deficiency which we experience every day in our knowledge of things, for we are ignorant of many of the properties of sensible things, and in many cases we are unable to discover the nature of those properties which we perceive by our senses. Much less, therefore, is human reason capable of investigating all the truths about that most sublime essence. This agrees with the saying of the philosopher, where he says that our intellect is like the eye of a bat in reason in relation to the sun, in relation to those primary things which are most evident in nature. To this truth Holy Writ also bears witness, for it is written, "Can you find out the deep things of God? Can you find out the limit of the Almighty?" Job 11:7. And behold, God is great, exceeding our knowledge. Job 36:26. And we know in part, 1 Corinthians 13:9. Therefore, all that is said about God, though it can be investigated by reason, must not be immediately rejected as false, as the Manichaeans and many unbelievers have thought. Chapter 4. That the truth about divine things which is attainable by reason is fittingly proposed to man as an object of belief. While then the truth of the intelligible things of God is twofold, one to which the inquiry of reason can attain, the other which surpasses the whole range of human reason, both are fittingly proposed by God to man as an object of belief. We must first show this with regard to that truth which is attainable by the inquiry of reason, lest it appear to some that, since it can be attained by reason, it is useless to make it an object of faith by supernatural inspiration. Now there would be three unsuitable consequences if this truth were left solely to the inquiry of reason. For if that few men would have knowledge of God, for very many are hindered from gathering the fruit of diligent inquiry, which is the discovery of truth, for three reasons. Some indeed on account of the indisposition of temperament, from which many are naturally indisposed to knowledge, so that no efforts of theirs would enable them to reach to the attainment of the highest degree of human knowledge, which consists in knowing God. Some are hindered by the needs of household affairs, for there must be among men some that devote themselves to the conduct of temporal affairs, who would be unable to devote so much time and to the leisure of contemplative research as to reach the summit of human inquiry, namely the knowledge of God. And some are hindered by laziness, for in order to acquire the knowledge of God in those things which reason is able to investigate, one must have a previous knowledge of many things. For almost the entire consideration of philosophy is directed to the knowledge of God, on account of which metaphysics, which is about divine things, is the last of the parts of philosophy to be studied. Thus it is not possible to arrive at the inquiry about the aforesaid truth, except after a most laborious study, and few are willing to take upon themselves this labor out of the love of knowledge, even though God has instilled natural desire for it in the minds of men. The second inconvenience is that those who would arrive at the discovery of the aforesaid truth would scarcely succeed in doing so after a long time. First, because this truth is so profound that the human intellect is only enabled to grasp it by reason after long practice. Second, because many things are required beforehand, as stated above. Third, because the mind is not fit for the knowledge of so sublime a truth at the time of youth, when tossed about by the various movements of the passions, but calm gives prudence and knowledge, as is said in physics. Hence mankind would remain in the deepest darkness of ignorance in the path of reason, were if the path of reason were the only available way to the knowledge of God, because the knowledge of God, which especially makes men perfect and good, would be acquired only by the few, and by these only after a long time. The third inconvenience is that much falsehood is mingled with the investigations of human reason, on account of our intellect's weakness in forming judgments and the admixture of phantasms. Consequently, many would remain in doubt about those things even which are most truly demonstrated, while ignoring the force of the demonstration, especially when they perceive that different things are taught by the various men who are called wise. Moreover, among the many demonstrated truths there is sometimes a mixture of falsehood, which is not demonstrated but asserted for some probable or sophisticated reason, which at times is mistaken for a demonstration. Therefore it was necessary that definite certainty and pure truth about divine things should be offered to man by the way of faith. Therefore the divine clemency helpfully provides that even some things which reason is able to investigate are held by faith, so that all may share in the knowledge of God easily, and without doubt or error. Thus it is written, "You must no longer live as the Gentiles do in the futility of their minds. They are darkened in their understanding." Ephesians 4:17-18, and "all your sons shall be taught by the Lord." Isaiah 54:13. Chapter 5. That those things which cannot be investigated by reason are fittingly proposed to man as an object of faith. It may appear to some that those things which cannot be investigated by reason ought not to be proposed to man as an object of faith, because divine wisdom provides for each thing according to the mode of its nature. We must therefore prove that it is also necessary for those things which surpass reason to be proposed by God to man as an object of faith. For no man tends to do a thing by his desire and endeavor unless it be previously known to him. Thus, since man is directed by divine providence to a higher good than human frailty can attain in the present life, as we shall show in the sequel, Book 3, his mind had to be bidden to something higher than those things to which our reason can reach in the present life, so that he might learn to aspire and to tend to his endeavors, and to something surpassing the whole stage of the present life. And this is especially true about the Christian religion, which alone promises spiritual and eternal goods, for which reason it proposes many things surpassing the thought of man. But the old law, which contained promises of temporal things, proposed few things above human inquiry. It was with this motive that the philosophers, to wean men from sensible pleasures to virtue, took care to show that there are other goods of greater account than those which appeal to the senses, the taste of which things affords much greater delight to those who devote themselves to active or contemplative virtues. Again, this truth needed to be proposed to man as an object of faith, so that he may have truer knowledge of God. For we only know God truly when we believe that he is far above all that man can possibly think of God, for the divine essence surpasses man's natural knowledge, as stated above, chapter 3. Thus, by the fact that certain things about God are proposed to man which surpass his reason, he is strengthened in his opinion that God is far above what he is able to think. Another advantage results from this, namely the checking of presumption, which is the mother of error, for there are some who presume so far on their wits that they think themselves capable of measuring the whole nature of things by their intellect, namely thinking all things are true that seem so to them, and false which do not. Accordingly, so that man's mind might be freed from this presumption and seek the truth humbly, it was necessary that God should propose to man certain things far surpassing his intellect. Yet another advantage is made apparent by the words of the philosopher, for when a certain Simonides maintained that man should neglect the knowledge of God and apply his mind to human affairs, and declared that a man ought to relish human things and mortal things. The philosopher contradicted him, saying that a man ought to devote himself to immortal and divine things as much as he can. Hence he says that although we perceive but little of higher substances, yet that little is more loved and desired than all the knowledge we have of lower substances. He also says that when questions about the heavenly bodies can be answered by a short and probable solution, the hearer rejoices greatly. All this shows that, however imperfect the knowledge of the highest things may be, it bestows very great perfection on the soul, and consequently, although human reason is unable to fully grasp things above reason, it nevertheless acquires much perfection if at least it holds things in any way whatever by faith. Thus it is written, matters too great for human understanding have been shown you, Sirach 3:25, and the things that are of God no man knows but the Spirit of God. But to us God hath revealed them by his Spirit. 1 Corinthians 2:10, chapter 6, that it is not a mark of levity to assent to the things that are of faith, although they are above reason. Now those who believe this truth, of which reason affords no proof, believe not lightly, as though following foolish fables. 2 Peter 1:16. For divine wisdom himself, who knows all things most fully, deigned to reveal to man the secrets of God's wisdom, Job 11:6, and by suitable arguments proves his presence and the truth of his doctrine and inspiration, by performing works surpassing the capability of the whole of nature, namely the wondrous healing of the sick, the raising of the dead to life, a marvelous control over the heavenly bodies, and what excites yet more wonder, the inspiration of human minds, so that unlettered and simple persons are filled with the Holy Spirit, and in one instant are endowed with the most sublime wisdom and eloquence. And after considering these arguments, convinced by the strength of the proof, and not by the force of arms, nor by the promise of delights, but and this and this is the greatest marvel of all, amidst the tyranny of persecutions, a countless crowd of not only simple but also the wisest men embrace the Christian faith, which inculcates things surpassing all human understanding, curbs the pleasures of the flesh, and teaches contempt of all worldly things. That the minds of mortal things should assent to such things is both the greatest of miracles and the evident work of divine inspiration, seeing that they despise visible things and desire only those that are invisible. And that this happened not suddenly nor by chance, but by the disposition of God, is shown by the fact that God foretold that he would do so by the manifold oracles of the prophets, whose books we hold in veneration as bearing witness to our faith. This particular kind of proof is alluded to in Hebrews 2:3-4, in which, namely, the salvation of mankind, having begun to be declared by the Lord, was confirmed with us by them that heard him, God also bearing witness by signs and wonders and diverse distributions of the Holy Spirit. Now such a wondrous conversion of the world to the Christian faith is a most indubitable proof that such signs did take place, so that there is no need to repeat them when they are so evidently apparent from their effect. For it would be the most wondrous sign of all, if, without any wondrous sign, the world were persuaded by simple and lowly men to believe things so arduous, to accomplish things so difficult, and to hope for things so sublime. Although even in our time God does not cease to work miracles through his saints in confirmation of the faith. On the other hand, those who introduced the errors of the sects proceeded in contrary fashion, as is clear from Mohammed, who enticed peoples with the promise of carnal pleasures, to a desire of which the concupiscence of the flesh instigates. He also delivered commandments in keeping with his promises, by giving the reins to carnal pleasure, in which it is easy for carnal men to obey. Also, the lessons of truth which he inculcated were only such as can be easily known to any man of average wisdom by his natural powers. In fact, he mingled the truths which he taught with many fables and most false doctrines. Nor did he add any signs of supernatural agency, which alone are a fitting witness of divine inspiration, since a visible work that can only be from God proves the teacher of truth to be invisibly inspired, but he asserted that he was sent in the power of arms, which sign is not lacking even to robbers and tyrants. Again, those who believed in him from the outset were not wise men practiced in things divine and human, but bestial men, who dwelt in the deserts, utterly ignorant of all divine teaching, and it was by a multitude of such men and the force of arms that he compelled others to submit to his law. Lastly, no divine oracles of prophets in a previous age bore witness to him. Rather, he corrupted almost all the teaching of the Old and New Testaments by a narrative replete with fables, as one may see by a perusal of his law. Hence, by a cunning device, he did not commit the reading of the Old and New Testament books to his followers, lest he should thereby be convicted of falsehood. Thus it is evident that those who believe his words believe lightly.